At 1 o'clock in the morning, my daughter collapsed at my doorstep. Her face was pale, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked at me with an expression I had seen 1,000 times in my career as a homicide detective, the look of someone who had just survived something terrible. "Dad," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Marcus hit me, and he's been stealing from the company. Everything." I stood there in the doorway, my hand still on the knob, feeling my blood turn to ice water in my veins. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just looked at my daughter, my Emily, 32 years old, standing in front of me like a ghost of herself. Then I did what I'd been trained to do for 43 years. I pulled her inside. I sat her down, and I started gathering evidence. But first I went to my study, unlocked my gun safe, and loaded my service weapon. Then I called my lawyer. "Start the plan now," I told him. "My name is Detective Richard Sullivan, retired. I want you to know that right now before we go any further. I'm glad you're here watching this. If this story resonates with you, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know how far the truth can travel. Because what I'm about to tell you is about betrayal, about family, about a man who thought he could destroy everything I built over 67 years of life. He thought wrong. Let me take you back 6 hours before Emily showed up at my door. I was in my workshop in the garage, restoring a 1967 Mustang I had bought at an estate sale 3 months earlier. The radio was playing old blues, B.B. King crying through the speakers about betrayal and loss. I didn't know it then, but the universe was trying to tell me something. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mr. Sullivan?" a woman's voice asked. "My name is Patricia Chen. I'm a forensic accountant with Davidson and Associates. Your son-in-law Marcus hired our firm to do an audit of Sullivan Construction. I need to speak with you immediately. It's urgent." I felt my detective instincts kick in immediately. That cold, focused feeling that had served me through 4 decades of investigating murders, disappearances, and every kind of human evil you could imagine. "Why would Marcus hire a forensic accountant without telling me?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "That's exactly why I'm calling you, Mr. Sullivan." She paused. "I found some irregularities in the company accounts, significant irregularities. I think you need to see these documents immediately. Can you meet me tomorrow morning?" I looked at my watch. It was 7 o'clock in the evening. "Tomorrow morning is too late," I said. "Where are you now?" 2 hours later, I was sitting in a Denny's restaurant off Interstate 10 across from Patricia Chen, a woman in her early 40s with sharp eyes and a briefcase full of documents that would change my life forever. She spread the papers across the table like evidence at a crime scene. That's exactly what this was. A crime scene. Outside the restaurant, trucks rumbled past on the highway. Inside, a waitress poured coffee and checked on late-night diners. But at our table, time seemed to stop as Patricia began explaining how my son-in-law had systematically destroyed everything I had built. "Mr. Sullivan," she began, her voice low and professional, "I need to show you something. Your company, Sullivan Construction, has been systematically drained over the past 4 years. I'm talking about embezzlement on a massive scale." I stared at the documents, bank statements, transfer records, invoices for work that was never done, purchase orders for materials that were never delivered. The numbers swam in front of my eyes. "How much?" I asked. My voice sounded strange in my own ears, distant and cold. Patricia looked at me with something like pity in her eyes. "So far, I've documented $1.7 million in fraudulent transactions. But Mr. Sullivan, I've only been through about 60% of the records. When I complete the full audit, the final number will likely exceed $2 million. I sat back in the booth, feeling like I had been shot in the chest. Over $2 million. The company I had built with my own hands starting when I was 25 years old, working construction jobs on weekends while I worked my way through the police academy. The company I had grown over 42 years, through recessions and booms, through injuries and setbacks, through the years when my wife Catherine was sick and I worked double shifts to pay medical bills. Catherine had died 8 years ago from cancer. Through the lean times when I went without a salary to keep my workers employed. Through every challenge and obstacle, I had kept Sullivan Construction alive, and I had handed it over to Marcus 4 years ago when I retired from the police force. Because he was my son-in-law. Because he was married to my Emily. Because I trusted him with everything I had spent my life building. "Show me everything," I said. My voice was steady now, cold, focused. This was what I knew how to do. Gather evidence, build a case, find the truth. For the next 3 hours, Patricia walked me through the evidence. Marcus had created shell companies, Apex Consulting, Bradley Materials, Summit Services, all owned by him through LLCs registered in Delaware. He would create fake invoices for services never rendered, approve them himself using his authority as company president, and transfer money into accounts he controlled. $20,000 here, $75,000 there. Once, $230,000 in a single transaction for construction materials that were never delivered. "How did you find this?" I asked Patricia. She smiled grimly. "I used to work for the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit before going into private practice. The patterns jumped out immediately. Shell companies with similar naming structures. Invoices that were always just under the threshold requiring board approval. Payments that coincided with Marcus's access to company accounts. Then I found your name on the original incorporation documents and realized you might not know what was happening." "Patricia, I need you to document everything," I said. "Every transaction, every shell company, every forged signature." She nodded. "I'm already doing that." "But Mr. Sullivan, there's something else." She pulled out another document. "A life insurance policy. Your daughter Emily is the beneficiary of a $2 million policy on your life, taken out 3 years ago. Marcus is the policy owner. He's been paying the premiums from company funds." My hands shook, not from fear, from rage, cold, calculated rage. I took out my phone and called my lawyer, David Morrison. We had worked together for 20 years. He handled business contracts, estate planning, and had connections throughout the Texas legal system. "David," I said, "I need emergency restraining orders, emergency injunctions, criminal complaints, everything. I'm taking down my son-in-law, and I need it done by tomorrow morning." I got home at 2 in the morning. Emily was asleep on my couch, exhausted from crying and fear. I covered her with a blanket and spent the rest of the night in my study, going through Patricia's documents page by page, building my case the way I had built hundreds of cases over 43 years as a homicide detective. By dawn, I had it all mapped out. Marcus had stolen millions over 4 years. Patricia completed her analysis overnight and sent me the final numbers. $2.3 million. That was the total. $2.3 million. He had also forged my signature on business loans totaling $800,000, money that disappeared into his shell companies. Those loans were coming due. If they weren't paid, the lenders could seize Sullivan Construction's assets, force bankruptcy. Marcus had been planning to destroy the company completely and walk away with millions while leaving me holding fraudulent debts. And Emily would be left holding a life insurance policy on my life. He had been planning to kill me, make it look like an accident, cash in the policy, and disappear. Emily woke up around 8. I made coffee and sat down with her at the kitchen table. "Tell me everything," I said, "not just last night, everything, from the beginning." Emily took a breath. "It started about 3 years ago," she said. "Marcus changed. He became controlling, checking my phone, monitoring where I went, who I talked to. I thought it was just stress from running the company." She paused. 3 years ago, I had a brief affair, 2 months. It was wrong, and I ended it. But Marcus found out. He made me sign a post-nuptial agreement saying I'd forfeit everything in a divorce if I was unfaithful. He kept all the evidence, photos, emails, everything. He used it to control me for 3 years. Made me feel guilty. Made me feel like I owed him. For 3 years, I lived under that guilt and manipulation. "Go on," I said quietly. "Last night, I got home around 9. Marcus was on the phone in his study. The door was open. He was talking about moving money, offshore accounts, making everything untraceable before you," she gestured at me, "before something happened to you." I listened for 20 minutes. Then I confronted him. "What did he say?" I asked. Emily's voice dropped to almost a whisper. He didn't deny it. He laughed. Said I was too stupid to understand business. Said Sullivan Construction was going under anyway, and he was taking what he deserved for putting up with our family for 10 years. He called you an old man who didn't understand modern business. Said I was a disappointment who never gave him the son he wanted. Said the only good thing about marrying me was access to the company so he could bleed it dry before you died. I sat very still. My hands were clenched so tight, my knuckles were white. Keep going. I told him I was going to tell you everything, going to the police, going to expose him. That's when he grabbed me, pushed me against the wall, put his hands around my throat and squeezed until I couldn't breathe. He said if I told anyone, he would destroy me, that he had evidence of my affair that would ruin me in a divorce, that he had connections and I had nothing, that no one would believe me over him. What did you do? I asked. I waited until he let go. Then I grabbed my purse and ran, got in my car and drove straight here. Good girl, I said. You did exactly right. Within the hour, my lawyer, David Morrison, arrived at my house. He was 60 years old, gray-haired, sharp as a knife. I had worked with him since I bought my first house 35 years ago. He handled my business contracts, my estate planning, and every legal matter I'd ever had. Richard, he said, shaking my hand. I've already started the paperwork. Tell me everything. For the next hour, Emily gave her formal statement. David recorded it, took notes, asked clarifying questions. She described the slow disintegration of her marriage, the criticism that became constant, the controlling behavior that became suffocating, the monitoring of her phone, her emails, her movements, the guilt over her affair 3 years ago that Marcus had weaponized for 3 years of psychological abuse, the post-nuptial agreement he had forced her to sign under duress, and finally, the assault last night, the hands around her throat, the threats, the terror that made her run. When she finished, David looked at me. Richard, this is serious. We're talking about domestic violence, criminal threats, strangulation. That's a felony in Texas. Combined with the embezzlement and fraud that Patricia documented, Marcus is looking at serious prison time. Good, I said. I want him destroyed. Completely. David nodded. Here's what happens next. This morning, I'm filing for an emergency protective order for Emily. That gets granted within hours. Then, I'm filing an emergency injunction freezing all Sullivan Construction assets and bank accounts. That prevents Marcus from moving any more money. I'm also contacting District Attorney Sharon Miller. She and I go back 20 years. I'm giving her Patricia's full audit and Emily's statement. She'll file criminal complaints by end of business today. Is Patricia willing to testify? She is, I said. She's already preparing her formal expert report. David stood up. Then we have him. Marcus Webb is done. After David left, I got Emily settled in the guest bedroom. Try to get some rest, I told her. Today is going to be a long day. Tomorrow will be even longer. But I promise you this, Marcus will never hurt you again. Emily hugged me. She was crying. Thank you, Dad. I should have come to you sooner. I was so ashamed. About the affair, about not seeing what he was, about everything. There's nothing to be ashamed of, I said. He's a predator. He saw someone vulnerable and he exploited that. But you're safe now, and we're going to make sure he pays for everything he did. I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart. Now rest. I didn't rest. I spent the day preparing. At 10 a.m., David called. Emergency protective order granted. Marcus is barred from contacting Emily or coming within 500 feet of her. At 11, he called again. Emergency injunction granted. All Sullivan Construction accounts are frozen. Marcus can't touch a penny. At noon, my phone started ringing. Marcus, 7 calls in a row, then text messages. Where is Emily? You don't understand. We need to talk. This is all a misunderstanding. Call me. We can work this out like adults. I saved every message, every voicemail, evidence. That afternoon, I drove to the Sullivan Construction offices. My office manager, Gloria Rivera, was there. She had been with me for 15 years, a tough woman in her 50s who ran the administrative side of the business with iron efficiency. Mr. Sullivan, she said when I walked in. Thank God. Marcus came in this morning. He was yelling, packing up his office. He tried to fire me, tried to tell the crew the company was shutting down and they should look for other jobs. He doesn't have that authority, I said. Gloria, call every employee. Tell them Marcus Webb has been removed from his position. Tell them their jobs are secure. Tell them to report to work tomorrow as normal. If Marcus tries to contact anyone, they should call the police immediately." "What's happening?" Gloria asked. "Marcus has been embezzling from the company," I said. "We're taking legal action. The police are involved. I need you to secure his office and make sure nothing else is removed." "Already done," Gloria said. "I locked his office after he left." "Good." I searched Marcus's office myself. He had tried to sanitize it, but people always miss things, always. I found a thumb drive taped under his desk, business cards for shell companies hidden in a false bottom drawer, a notebook with handwritten records of transfers and account numbers. Marcus had kept records of his own crimes, classic criminal arrogance. I called Patricia and had her photograph everything in place before I turned it over to the police. 3 days later, Marcus was arrested. The San Antonio Police Department sent 2 detectives to his hotel room. He had been staying at a La Quinta Inn since the protective order barred him from the house he had shared with Emily. They read him his rights, arrested him for embezzlement, fraud, forgery, and felony strangulation. The bail hearing was the next day. District Attorney Sharon Miller, a tough prosecutor in her 50s who I had worked with during my time on the force, argued Marcus was a flight risk. He had access to offshore accounts. He had been planning to flee the country. He had violently assaulted his wife when she confronted him about his crimes. She requested bail be set at $1 million. Marcus's attorney, Raymond Cruz, from a well-known downtown defense firm, argued Marcus was innocent, a respected businessman being railroaded by a vindictive ex-cop father-in-law who couldn't accept that the family business was failing. He requested bail of $50,000. The judge looked at the evidence. Patricia's financial audit showing $2.3 million in embezzlement, the forged loan documents, the life insurance policy Marcus had taken out on me without my knowledge, Emily's statement and the photographs of bruises on her neck from the strangulation. The judge set bail at $750,000. Marcus couldn't make it. He was remanded to Bexar County Jail to await trial. I attended the hearing, sat in the back of the courtroom. Marcus saw me. Our eyes met across the room. I saw rage there and fear. He knew he was finished. Over the next 6 months, the case built momentum. Patricia completed her full forensic audit. The final number was $2.3 million embezzled over 4 years, $47,000 per month on average. She traced every transaction, every shell company, every fake invoice. She found offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland where Marcus had been moving money. Money laundering, federal crimes. Sharon Miller filed additional charges. The federal government got involved. Marcus now faced both state and federal prosecution. Meanwhile, I worked to save Sullivan Construction. The emergency injunction had frozen the accounts, but it also froze our ability to operate. David Morrison filed motions to allow legitimate business operations to continue while preventing Marcus from accessing any funds. It took weeks of legal maneuvering, but eventually we got court approval to resume operations under my direct control. I brought in an interim president, a former colleague from the construction industry who owed me a favor. We stabilized the business, reassured clients, kept the crew working. It was hard. The publicity from Marcus's arrest was damaging, but we survived. Emily moved in with me temporarily, started therapy twice a week to deal with the abuse and trauma. I watched her slowly start to heal, start to remember who she was before Marcus, start to find her strength again. The trial was scheduled for 8 months after Marcus's arrest. That gave the prosecution time to build an airtight case, but it also gave Marcus's defense attorney Raymond Cruz time to prepare his strategy. Cruz was going to argue that Marcus was just an aggressive businessman, making controversial decisions to save a failing company, that the shell companies were legitimate business structures, that I had forgotten signing loan documents because of my age, and was now trying to make Marcus a scapegoat for my own failures. He was going to paint me as a confused old man, and Marcus as an innocent victim of a family grudge. I knew this because I had spent 43 years in law enforcement. I knew how defense attorneys operated. So I prepared. I went through every document with surgical precision. I created timelines. I made charts showing the flow of money from Sullivan Construction through the shell companies into Marcus's personal accounts. I rehearsed my testimony with Sharon Miller until I could recite facts in my sleep. And I worked with Emily on her testimony, teaching her how to stay calm under cross-examination, how to answer only what was asked, how to not let the defense attorney bait her into emotional outbursts that could damage her credibility. "You're going to do great," I told her the night before trial started. "You're stronger than you know." "I'm terrified," she said. "That's normal," I said. "But remember this, you're telling the truth. And truth is powerful. All you have to do is tell what happened. The truth will do the rest." The trial began on a Monday morning in October. The courthouse was packed with media, with Sullivan Construction employees who came to support me, with community members who had followed the case in the news. I walked in with Emily and David Morrison. Marcus sat at the defense table looking confident, well-dressed in a dark suit, well-coached by his expensive attorney. But I saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched when he saw us. He was worried. Sharon Miller's opening statement was devastating. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said to the jury, "this case is about betrayal on the most fundamental level. Richard Sullivan spent 43 years serving this community as a homicide detective. He built a successful construction company from nothing, working nights and weekends for 42 years. When he retired from the police force, he trusted his son-in-law Marcus Webb to run that company, to take care of his life's work, to take care of his daughter Emily. Marcus Webb betrayed that trust in every possible way. Over the next weeks, we will show you how he systematically stole $2.3 million through an elaborate fraud scheme spanning 4 years, how he forged documents, how he created fake companies, how he moved money to offshore accounts, how he planned to destroy Sullivan Construction and disappear with the money. And we'll show you how, when his wife confronted him about these crimes, he put his hands around her throat and tried to strangle her. This is not a business dispute. This is theft. This is fraud. This is violence. And we ask you to hold Marcus Webb accountable for his crimes. Raymond Cruz's opening was predictable. Marcus Webb is an innocent man being railroaded by a vindictive former police officer who can't accept that the family business is failing, he told the jury. The prosecution wants you to believe that Marcus is some kind of criminal mastermind who spent years planning an elaborate fraud. The reality is much simpler. Marcus made aggressive business decisions, trying to save a company that was already in decline due to poor management. He used creative financial structures that are completely legal in modern business. And when the company continued to struggle, Richard Sullivan decided to blame Marcus rather than accept responsibility for his own failures as a businessman. By the end of this trial, you'll see that Marcus Webb is guilty of nothing except trying to help his father-in-law's failing business. The first week was all about the financial evidence. Patricia Chen testified for 2 full days. She walked the jury through every fraudulent transaction, every shell company, every forged document. She was brilliant, clear, methodical, unshakable under cross-examination. She had charts and graphs and bank records. She showed exactly how the money flowed from Sullivan Construction into Marcus's shell companies and then into his personal accounts and offshore banks. Raymond Cruz tried to attack her credibility, tried to suggest she was biased because I had hired her originally, tried to confuse the jury with technical financial jargon and alternative explanations. Patricia demolished every argument. She calmly explained why each transaction was fraudulent, why the shell companies had no legitimate business purpose, why the offshore accounts proved intent to hide the money. The second week focused on the forgery. A handwriting expert from the Texas Department of Public Safety testified that the signatures on the loan documents were definitely not mine. He showed the jury detailed comparisons using magnified images, pointed out specific differences in pressure, stroke patterns, letter formation. He testified that in his professional opinion, someone had attempted to forge my signature and had done a poor job of it. The differences were obvious to a trained examiner. On day 9, Emily testified. She walked to the witness stand looking small and nervous. But when Sharon Miller began asking questions, Emily transformed. Her voice was calm, clear, powerful. She told the jury about her marriage, about how Marcus had slowly become controlling over the years, monitoring her phone, checking her emails, questioning where she went and who she talked to, isolating her from friends. She testified about the brief affair she had 3 years ago, how she had ended it and tried to repair her marriage, how Marcus had discovered it and used it to control her, the post-nuptial agreement he forced her to sign, giving up all her rights, the constant guilt and psychological manipulation for 3 years. Sharon asked, "Did Marcus ever express remorse for his controlling behavior?" "No," Emily said. "He used my mistake to justify treating me however he wanted. When I tried to talk about how his behavior was hurting me, he would throw the affair in my face, say I owed him, that I had destroyed his trust and I had to earn it back, but I could never earn it back. No matter what I did, it was never enough." "Tell the jury about the night of September 24th, Sharon said. Emily took a breath. "I came home around 9 o'clock. Marcus was in his study on the phone. The door was partially open. I heard him talking about moving money offshore, about making transactions untraceable, about waiting for my father to die so he could cash in some kind of insurance policy. I was confused and scared. I listened for about 20 minutes. He was clearly planning something terrible. Then I confronted him in his study." "What did he say?" Sharon asked. Emily looked directly at the jury. "He laughed at me. He said I was too stupid to understand business. He said my father was an old man who would be dead soon anyway. He said he deserved the money for putting up with our family for 10 years. He said he was going to take everything, and there was nothing we could do to stop him. And what happened next? I told him I was going to tell my father everything, that I was going to the police, that he couldn't get away with stealing from us." Emily's voice caught slightly. "That's when he grabbed me, pushed me hard against the wall, put both his hands around my neck and squeezed. I couldn't breathe. I thought he was going to kill me." The courtroom was completely silent. Even the journalists had stopped taking notes. "How long did he strangle you?" "About 30 seconds. It felt like forever. I saw spots in my vision. I couldn't breathe at all. What did he say while he was strangling you?" "He said that if I told anyone anything, he would destroy me. That he had evidence of my affair that would ruin me in court. That he had lawyers and connections, and I had nothing. That no one would believe me over him. Then he let go, and I collapsed. As soon as I could breathe again, I grabbed my purse and ran out of the house. I drove straight to my father's house. Sharon introduced photographs of the bruising on Emily's neck taken that night, medical records from the examination by an emergency room physician 3 days later, testimony from the doctor about injuries consistent with strangulation. Then she yielded to the defense for cross-examination. Raymond Cruz's cross-examination was brutal. He tried to make Emily look like a bitter wife, lying to cover up her own infidelity. Tried to suggest she was testifying because I was forcing her to help frame Marcus. Tried to paint her as an unreliable witness with a motive to lie about everything. "Isn't it true you had an affair that destroyed your marriage?" Cruz asked. "I had a brief affair 3 years ago that I deeply regretted," Emily said calmly. "I ended it and tried to work on my marriage. Marcus used it to control and manipulate me for 3 years. Isn't it true you're only testifying against Marcus because your father told you to?" Cruz pressed. Emily looked at him steadily and said, "My father didn't make me do anything. I'm testifying because Marcus Webb is a thief and an abuser and a liar, and he needs to be held accountable for what he did to me and to my father." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The judge gavelled for order. Cruz had no more questions. He looked shaken. "On day 12, I testified. Sharon took me through my background. 43 years with the San Antonio Police Department, started as a patrol officer, worked my way up to homicide detective, retired 3 years ago, built Sullivan Construction on weekends, and after hours over 42 years, grew it from nothing into a successful business with 50 employees. Then, she asked about Marcus. When did Marcus Webb come into your life? He married my daughter Emily 10 years ago. At the time, he seemed like a good man, educated. He had an MBA, ambitious. He said he wanted to help grow the family business. Did you trust him?" "Yes." "Completely. He was my son-in-law. Family. I gave him increasing responsibility over the years as he learned the construction business. 4 years ago, when I retired from the police force, I turned over day-to-day operations to him. I kept ownership of the company, but he ran the business as president. When did you first suspect something was wrong? Not until Patricia Chen called me on that evening. I trusted Marcus completely. I thought he was taking care of the business, taking care of my daughter. I had no idea he was stealing millions of dollars or that he was abusing Emily psychologically and physically. How did you feel when you learned what Marcus had done? I paused, choosing my words carefully. I felt betrayed, angry, but mostly I felt like I had failed my daughter. I brought Marcus into our family. I gave him access to everything. I trusted him with my life's work, and he used that trust to hurt Emily and destroy the company my late wife and I had built together. I should have seen the signs sooner. Sharon nodded sympathetically. Mr. Sullivan, are you a wealthy man? No, I said. I'm a retired cop. I live on my pension and what the company generates. Sullivan Construction is my retirement, my nest egg. It's what I plan to leave to Emily. Marcus didn't just steal money. He tried to steal my daughter's inheritance and my ability to support myself in retirement. Then, Cruz took over for cross-examination. He tried to paint me as a controlling father who couldn't accept that the business was failing under new management. Tried to suggest I was exaggerating the losses to frame Marcus. Tried to imply I had fabricated evidence because I wanted revenge for some imagined slight. But I had been on the witness stand hundreds of times in my career, testifying in murder trials. I knew how to stay calm, how to stick to facts, how to not let an attorney bait me into anger. At one point, Cruz asked, "Isn't it true that on the night your daughter came to your house, you loaded a gun?" I looked directly at the jury. I'm a retired police officer. I owned firearms for self-protection. On the night my daughter came to me terrified, told me she had been physically assaulted by her husband, told me he had been stealing millions from my company. Yes, I loaded my service weapon. Because I didn't know if Marcus would follow her to my house. I didn't know if he would try to hurt her again or try to hurt me to stop us from going to the police. But I didn't go looking for him. I didn't confront him. I called my lawyer and I followed the law. Because that's what I've done my entire adult life. So you wanted to kill Marcus Webb? Cruz pressed, thinking he had scored a point. I looked at him coldly. I'm saying I was angry enough that the thought crossed my mind. I'm human. But I didn't act on that anger. I channeled it into building a legal case because I believe in justice, not vigilantism. I believe in the rule of law. I believe in the system, and I believed that system would hold Marcus accountable for his crimes. The courtroom was dead silent. Even Cruz seemed uncertain whether he had scored points or damaged his own case. The prosecution rested after 2.5 weeks of testimony. The defense case was weak. Marcus didn't testify. Smart move by Cruz because Marcus would have been destroyed on cross-examination by Sharon Miller. Instead, they called character witnesses. Former co-workers from before Sullivan Construction who said Marcus was a nice guy. A business consultant who argued that shell companies were legitimate tax structures and Marcus was just being financially savvy. But the consultant fell apart under Sharon's cross-examination. She got him to admit he had been paid $15,000 by Marcus's defense team to provide expert testimony. Got him to admit he hadn't reviewed all the financial records, only selected documents provided by the defense. Got him to admit he couldn't explain why legitimate business expenses would be routed through offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands instead of being paid directly. By the time Sharon was done with him, the consultant looked like exactly what he was, a paid expert giving a bought opinion. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When the bailiff announced they had reached a verdict, my heart was pounding. Emily grabbed my hand tight. We stood as the jury filed back into the courtroom. The foreman, a middle-aged man who had been taking notes throughout the trial, stood when the judge asked for the verdict. We find the defendant Marcus Webb guilty of embezzlement, guilty of fraud, guilty of forgery, guilty of grand theft, guilty of money laundering, guilty of felony strangulation, guilty on all 17 counts. Marcus's face went white. All the color drained out of it. Cruz slumped in his chair. Emily started crying and grabbed me in a tight hug. I felt a wave of relief so profound I almost couldn't stand. Sharon Miller looked at me across the courtroom and nodded once. We had won. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Sharon Miller argued forcefully for the maximum sentence, 25 years in state prison. Your Honor, she said, Marcus Webb systematically stole $2.3 million from a family that trusted him completely. He forged documents. He created an elaborate fraud scheme spanning 4 years. He abused his wife psychologically for years, using her past mistake to control every aspect of her life. Then he physically assaulted her, strangling her when she tried to stop his crimes. He has shown absolutely no remorse. He attempted to destroy evidence. He tried to intimidate witnesses. This was not a crime of passion or desperation. This was calculated, methodical, predatory. He deserves the maximum sentence available under law. Raymond Cruz argued for leniency. Marcus Webb is a 34-year-old first-time offender, he said to the judge, a man who made serious mistakes, but who doesn't deserve to have his entire life destroyed. He has no prior criminal record. He's young enough to be rehabilitated. We ask the court to consider that Marcus can still contribute to society if given a chance. We ask for mercy. Judge Sarah Henderson listened to both arguments. Then she looked directly at Marcus. Mr. Webb, she said, you violated the trust of your wife, your father-in-law, and every employee of Sullivan Construction. You stole over $2 million through sophisticated fraud schemes. You showed no remorse whatsoever during this trial. You attempted to intimidate witnesses and destroy evidence even after your arrest. This court has reviewed all the evidence presented. I have read the victim impact statements from Emily Sullivan and Richard Sullivan. I have considered your lack of prior criminal history. But I have also considered the severity, the duration, and the calculated nature of your crimes. She paused for effect. I am sentencing you to 20 years in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. You will be eligible for parole after serving 80% of your sentence. That's 16 years minimum before you can even be considered for release. You are ordered to pay full restitution of $2.3 million plus interest and legal fees to Sullivan Construction and Richard Sullivan. You are ordered to pay an additional $500,000 in punitive damages to Emily Sullivan for the abuse you inflicted on her. Furthermore, I am recommending to federal prosecutors that they pursue charges for money laundering and offshore banking violations. This court is adjourned. Marcus stood there, stunned and pale. The bailiff came forward and put him in handcuffs. As they led him out of the courtroom, Marcus turned and looked at me one last time. There was pure hatred in his eyes, but also defeat, complete and total defeat. He knew it was over. I felt no satisfaction, no sense of victory or vindication, just tired relief that justice had been served and Emily was safe. Over the next year, things slowly returned to normal. Emily finalized her divorce from Marcus. Because of his criminal conviction, the divorce settlement was heavily in her favor. She received the house they had shared and most of the marital assets. Marcus's appeals were denied. At every level, the evidence was simply too overwhelming. The federal government filed additional charges for money laundering and offshore banking violations. Marcus was now looking at serving the 20-year state sentence, followed by an additional 10 years federal. He would be in his 60s before he saw freedom again, if he ever did. Emily continued therapy twice a week and made real progress, healing from the years of psychological abuse and manipulation. The physical bruises had healed quickly, but the emotional scars took longer. But she was doing the work. She was getting better. She got a job at a different construction company working in project management, and she excelled at it. Her new boss told me she was one of the best project managers he had ever worked with. She started dating again after about 6 months, very cautiously. She met a man named Stephen Brooks through a friend. He was a quiet accountant who worked at a downtown firm. He was 40 years old, divorced with no children. Most importantly, he treated Emily with respect and genuine kindness. About 8 months after the trial, Emily asked if she could bring Stephen to dinner at my house. I said yes. I made steaks on the grill, and we sat on my back porch. After dinner, I asked Stephen to stay for a moment while Emily went inside. I looked at him directly. "Stephen," I said, "I need to make something very clear. If you ever hurt my daughter in any way, if you ever raise your hand to her, if you ever manipulate or control her, you will regret it. Do you understand me?" Stephen met my gaze steadily. He didn't flinch. "Mr. Sullivan," he said calmly, "I understand completely. I've seen what Emily has been through. I know what Marcus did to her. I would never do that to any woman, but especially not to Emily. She's an amazing person who deserves to be treated with love and respect. That's exactly what I intend to do." I studied him for a long moment. His eyes were clear, honest. Then I nodded slowly. "Good. We understand each other." Meanwhile, Sullivan Construction slowly recovered. It took time and hard work, but we rebuilt our reputation. I personally met with every major client to reassure them about the company's stability and integrity. I brought in good people to replace Marcus and the damage he had caused. We landed new contracts. We completed projects on time and under budget the way we always had before Marcus. The business started making profit again. I promoted Gloria Rivera to Vice President of Operations. She had earned it by holding everything together during the crisis. She was loyal, competent, and trustworthy. Everything Marcus had pretended to be. On the one-year anniversary of Marcus's sentencing, Emily came over for dinner. I grilled steaks again and we sat on the back porch watching the sunset over San Antonio. The sky was painted in shades of orange and red. "You know what's strange?" Emily said quietly. "What?" I asked. "I don't hate him anymore." "Marcus. I used to think about him constantly, about what he did, about how I could have been so blind for so long, about all the warning signs I missed. But now when I think about him, which isn't very often anymore, I just feel nothing. Like he's a stranger I used to know a long time ago." "That's very healthy," I said. "Hate takes energy. It consumes you. You have better things to do with your energy now." "Like what?" she asked with a slight smile. "Like living your life," I said. "Like being happy. Like building a future with Stephen if that's what you want. Like not letting what Marcus did define who you are or limit what you can become." Emily raised her wine glass. "To moving forward. To moving forward," I repeated, clinking my glass against hers. As the sun finished setting and the stars started to appear, I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the investigation, the trial, the victory. But mostly, I thought about resilience, about how people can survive terrible things and come out stronger on the other side, about how justice, when it finally comes, can heal wounds that seemed unhealable. 2 years after the trial, I got an unexpected call from the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. Marcus had requested to see me. He wanted to apologize, they said. I thought about it for a long time. Part of me wanted to refuse immediately, to let Marcus rot in prison without any closure or forgiveness. But another part of me was curious. What could he possibly say after everything he had done? What would an apology even mean at this point? I decided to go. I drove to the Huntsville unit, the maximum security prison where Marcus was serving his sentence. It was a 3-hour drive north from San Antonio. I spent most of it thinking about what I would say to him, if anything. They led me to a stark visiting room with glass partitions and phones. I sat down on one side. A few minutes later, Marcus was brought in wearing a white prison jumpsuit. He looked thinner than he had at trial. Older, his hair was already starting to gray at the temples, even though he was only 36 years old now. Prison ages you fast. We picked up the phones on either side of the glass partition. "Richard," Marcus said. His voice was hoarse, rough. "Thank you for coming. I didn't think you would. I didn't say anything. I just waited." "I wanted to apologize," Marcus said, "for everything. For stealing from you, for hurting Emily, for betraying your trust, for all of it." "I thought you didn't do anything wrong," I said coldly. "I thought you were innocent. That's what you told the jury. That's what your lawyer argued for weeks." Marcus looked down at his hands. "I was wrong. I did everything they said I did. I stole from you. I manipulated Emily. I used her guilt over the affair to control her for years. I forged your signature on loan documents. I created shell companies to hide the money. I was planning to take everything and disappear." He looked back up at me. I was greedy, arrogant. I thought I was smarter than everyone else, and I destroyed my own life because of it. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Why the sudden honesty?" Because I've had 2 years to think about what I did, Marcus said. 2 years sitting in a 6x8 cell. 2 years knowing I threw away everything good in my life for money. I had a wife who loved me, at least at the beginning. A father-in-law who trusted me and gave me opportunities. I had a good life, a good job, a future. And I destroyed it all because I wanted more. Because I thought I deserved more. I shook my head slowly. You didn't have a wife who loved you, I said. You had a wife you systematically abused and controlled and manipulated for years. You used her past mistake to torture her psychologically. You didn't have a father-in-law who trusted you. You had a mark you were scamming from the very beginning. Don't try to rewrite history now that you're facing the consequences of your choices. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. You're right. I know you're right. I was trying to make it sound better than it was. The truth is, I was a predator. I saw vulnerabilities and I exploited them. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve that. But I wanted you to know that I'm sorry for what it's worth. It's not worth anything, I said flatly. You're sorry because you got caught. You're sorry because you're in prison. You're sorry because you're facing 16 more years minimum before you're even eligible for parole. But if you had gotten away with it, if you had managed to cash in that life insurance policy after I died in some convenient accident, you wouldn't be sorry at all. You'd be living on a beach somewhere in the Caribbean, spending my money and never thinking about Emily or me again. That's probably true, Marcus admitted quietly. He seemed to shrink into himself. So why are you really here, Marcus? Why did you want to see me? Marcus asked. Why did you agree to come? Because I wanted to look you in the eye one more time, I said. I wanted to see what 2 years in prison looks like on a man who thought he was untouchable, on a man who thought he was smarter than everyone else. And what does it look like? Marcus asked bitterly. Like justice, I said simply. I hung up the phone, stood up, and walked out of that visiting room without looking back. I never saw Marcus Webb again. 5 years after Marcus went to prison, I got another call from the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. Marcus had died. Heart attack in his cell. He was only 39 years old. They wanted to know if I would claim the body for burial. I told them no. Let the state handle it. I had no interest in attending his funeral or acknowledging his death in any way. Emily heard about it through the prison notification system that keeps victims informed. She called me that evening, and I could hear the confusion in her voice. Dad, she said, Marcus is dead. How do you feel about that? I feel nothing, I said honestly. He stopped mattering to me a long time ago. When he went to prison, he became irrelevant to our lives. I know, Emily said. I feel the same way. It's strange, isn't it? That someone who was such a huge part of our lives for so long can just become irrelevant, completely forgotten. That's because he was never really part of our lives, I said. Not really. He was a parasite who attached himself to our family. When we cut him out, we got healthier. His death doesn't change anything for us. It doesn't make anything better or worse. It just is. You're right, Emily said. I thought I should feel something. Relief or closure or satisfaction or something. But I don't feel anything at all. Is that wrong? It's not wrong, I said. It's called healing. A few weeks later, I was going through some old boxes in my garage when I found a photo from Emily's wedding to Marcus. They looked so happy in the picture, so full of hope and promise and dreams for the future. It was all a lie, of course, but looking at that photo, I felt a wave of sadness, not for Marcus. He got exactly what he deserved, but for the years Emily had lost, for the trust that had been betrayed, for the innocence that could never be recovered, for all the pain that could have been avoided if I had seen through Marcus's lies sooner. I showed the photo to Emily the next time she visited my house. Do you want this? I asked, holding it out to her. She looked at it for a long moment, studied it. Then she said firmly, no, burn it. So I did. We went out to the fire pit in my backyard, and I lit the photo on fire with a match. We watched it curl and blacken and turn to ash. The faces disappeared. The fake smiles melted away until there was nothing left but ashes. Good riddance, Emily said quietly. Good riddance, I agreed. now 7. Years after this all began, I'm 74 years old. I still own Sullivan Construction, but I've stepped back from day-to-day operations. I hired a former Marine named James Martinez to run the company as president, and he does it with military precision and integrity. The business is stable and profitable again. Emily is thriving. She's a senior project manager at her construction company and doing excellent work. She and Stephen got married 3 years ago in a small, beautiful ceremony in my backyard. It was nothing like her first wedding. This one was simple, honest, and full of real love and real joy. They bought a house together last year, and 2 years ago they had a son, my first grandchild. They named him Richard after me. He's 2 years old now, smart as a whip, curious about everything, full of energy and laughter. Last weekend, little Richard was at my house. We were in the backyard, and he was fascinated by a butterfly that had landed on a flower. He toddled over to it carefully, his little face full of wonder. "Grandpa," he said in that way toddlers do, pointing at it. "Pretty." "Yes," I told him. "Very pretty." I picked him up so he could see the butterfly better without scaring it away. "One day I'll teach you about a lot of things," I told my grandson quietly. About integrity, about loyalty, about standing up for what's right even when it's hard, about protecting the people you love, about being a good man. But right now, let's just watch this butterfly together, because some moments are perfect just as they are. Emily came outside and saw us standing there watching the butterfly. She smiled. That smile was worth everything. All the pain, all the fighting, all the long nights building the case against Marcus, all the testimony and the trial. Because that smile meant she was happy, she was healing, she was free. She had found real love with a good man. She had built a family. And that's what mattered. Marcus is gone, dead and forgotten, irrelevant. But my family is thriving. Sullivan Construction is stable and profitable. Emily is happy in her marriage and her career. I have a grandson who will grow up knowing his grandfather fought for his mother when she needed it most. That's the real ending to this story. Not revenge, but survival. Not destruction, but rebuilding. Not hate, but love and family and moving forward into the future. If you're watching this video, I want you to know something important. If you're in a situation like Emily was, if someone is abusing you or controlling you or stealing from you, you have options. You can fight back. You can get help. You can survive. You can rebuild your life. It won't be easy. It will probably be the hardest thing you ever do, but you're stronger than you know. Trust me on this. I've seen people overcome impossible odds. I've seen victims become survivors. I've seen families heal from terrible betrayals. You can too. Here's what you need to do. Document everything, every incident of abuse, every threatening message, every financial transaction that seems wrong. Take photos, save emails and text messages, keep records. Evidence is power. Reach out to people you trust. Talk to family members. Talk to friends. Talk to lawyers. Talk to the police. Talk to therapists and counselors. Build a support system around you. You can't do this alone, and you don't have to. And remember this above all else. Abuse thrives in silence. The moment you speak up, the moment you refuse to accept the lies and manipulation, the moment you say no more, you take back your power. Marcus thought he had all the power. He thought he could control Emily forever. He thought he could steal from me without consequences. He thought he was smarter than everyone else, but he was wrong about all of it. Because the moment Emily found her voice, the moment she came to me for help, the moment we decided to fight back together, Marcus's power evaporated like morning mist. All he had left were his crimes. And crimes have consequences. Always. Thank you for watching my story. I hope it helps someone out there who's going through something similar. I hope it gives you courage to speak up. I hope it reminds you that justice is possible, that evil doesn't always win, that families can heal from even the worst betrayals. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this message of hope and survival can travel around the world. God bless you all. And remember, you are stronger than you think. You are braver than you believe. And you deserve a life free from abuse and manipulation. Never forget that. On the end screen, I'm leaving you 2 more stories from this channel that I think you'll find powerful and inspiring. They're about ordinary people who faced extraordinary challenges and came out victorious. Thank you for staying until the end. Until next time, keep fighting the good fight.